Welcome to the deep dive. We have a set of source files today that reads less like research and more like a detailed chronicle of an impending catastrophe. It jumps across a 10-year timeline of pure scientific rivalry.
Yeah, it's intense.
Our mission for you is ambitious: to understand the inception of the phenomenon known simply as extraordinary people, or EOs, and follow a vicious, decade-long conflict built entirely on shared intellect, profound betrayal, and some really cutting-edge, deadly science.
And it all comes down to a struggle for control. Control over the very boundaries of life and death.
Exactly.
The core material centers on two brilliant former pre-med students, Victor Vale and Eli Cardale, who later, interestingly, adopts the moniker Eli Ever.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. Their dangerous thesis work at Lakeland University, it just sets off this chain reaction that results in two radically different kinds of superhuman abilities and, more importantly, two radically opposed worldviews. This is a deep dive into trauma, scientific ambition, the psychology of survival, and the profound moral consequences of pushing the body past its breaking point.
That's right. We will systematically unpack the central, shockingly simple hypothesis for creating an EO, which involves trauma and, well, death itself. We'll conduct a detailed analysis of the two primary powers documented in this conflict: pain manipulation on one hand and reflexive regeneration on the other.
And then we'll meet the new, unexpected players.
Yeah.
People caught in the crossfire. A master hacker, a 12-year-old girl with a terrifying gift. It just escalates.
It really does.
What the source material suggests is that this is not just a story of, superpowered individuals. It's a critique of self-justification. The central question we have to address for you is, what happens when scientific ambition forces humanity beyond its natural mortal limits?
And who then gets to decide the moral cost of becoming something more than human?
Exactly. The documents strongly imply that one of these men believes he has found divine justification for murder, while the other embraced total nihilism as a form of freedom.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating and disturbing split.
Okay, let's unpack the starting point. We have to establish the environment where this dangerous seed was planted. 10 years ago, we find ourselves at Lakeland University.
Right.
And the sources, they paint this perfect, almost suffocating picture of the setting: an exclusive country club meets Gothic manor aesthetic. The atmosphere sounds like wealth, masking this profound intellectual arrogance.
The documents specifically describe it as an elegant cage.
That's the one, an elegant cage.
And that metaphor, the elegant cage, is so crucial. Lakeland prided itself on providing maximum intellectual freedom, especially for senior theses, which means there was, very little oversight on how ambitious a student could be.
Or dangerous.
Exactly.
Sure.
This intellectual space allowed two highly competitive, highly volatile students, Victor and Eli the room, to think dangerous thoughts,
Right.
unchecked by conventional academic constraints or any immediate moral supervision.
They were just competing for the same very limited intellectual glory. And let's look closely at Victor Vale before he was, fundamentally changed by all this. He's detailed as highly intellectual, naturally drawn to the objective sciences: biology, anatomy, neuroscience.
But the most revealing detail about his pre-EO persona is his hobby.
Oh yeah, this is fascinating. He's the son of two motivational speakers, Doctors Vale, these self-help empowerment gurus.
Right. And Victor's unique expression of rebellion and intellectual deconstruction is taking their saccharine self-help books and just paring them down into something disturbing and effective.
He uses black markers to cross out all the positive affirmations, reducing these massive paragraphs of encouragement into sparse, chilling statements.
And he takes this immense, almost surgical pride in the destruction. He ironically calls it a kind of personal zen. It's an intellectual precursor to his later ability to just switch off sensation. He's practicing detaching meaning from context.
Totally. We see his internal nihilism in the poetry he creates from these blacked out self-help volumes. The sources highlight one line: be lost, give up, give in. In the end, it would be better to surrender before you begin. Be lost, and then you will not care if you are ever found.
Chilling.
Right. This isn't just vandalism or, teenage rebellion. It's a profound statement about the peace found in intellectual surrender and giving up hope.
The observation that he uses his own energy to destroy the foundation of his parents' philosophy. It's a perfect precursor to the disregard he eventually shows for moral and physical barriers.
It suggests a profound detachment, or maybe a practiced ability to mimic acceptable social behavior while internally questioning all moral structure. He is like intellectually primed to reject conventional limits.
And into this vacuum of moral certainty steps his rival.
Eli Cardale. They constantly alternate for the top spot in the pre-medical department, which creates this pressurized zero-sum game between them.
And the files describe Eli as frighteningly charming, the perfect golden boy. But Victor's internal narrative in the documents suggests he sees Eli as, and this is a great quote, like one of those pictures full of small errors,
Of that.
with a darker self glittering just beneath that polished surface. He's the seemingly perfect academic specimen with these concealed, jagged edges.
Edges that Victor recognizes and I think maybe even fears a little.
I think so too. And this hidden darkness drives the thesis showdown in their comprehensive science seminar. This is where the first intellectual punch is thrown.
Okay, so Victor, ever the meticulous scientist, proposes a thesis that's rigorous but ultimately safe.
Very safe.
Adrenaline and its physical and emotional inducers and consequences.
Yeah.
Biochemical thresholds, fight or flight. It's focused on temporary, measurable, physical flux. It's all grounded in what's known.
And then Eli drops the bomb. He introduces the concept that completely halts the seminar and makes their state professor line pause. Extraordinary people.
His formal thesis proposal is an argument for the theoretical feasibility of the existence of extraordinary people, EOs, deriving from laws of biology, chemistry, and psychology.
And that immediately shifts the entire dynamic from theoretical biology to dangerous speculation.
Right.
What's fascinating here is how quickly Eli cut to the core problem that had baffled fringe researchers for decades. He looked at the existing, often fragmented data on documented EO cases, everything from unreliable urban legends to scattered police reports. And he realized the common factor wasn't some external agent like radiation.
It was trauma.
It was trauma. But as Victor would later realize, trauma alone wasn't a sufficient explanation. Otherwise, every victim of an accident or crime would manifest powers.
So Eli refines the idea into the NDE discovery, which is both elegant and, frankly, terrifying in its simplicity. The poor finding. The only consistent commonality in these rare cases was not just trauma, but death itself, the theory. EO creation requires a near-death experience, an NDE.
The absolute greatest physical and psychological trauma possible. And it has to be combined with two other components. A strong, active will to survive the experience, and possibly an underlying but vaguely defined genetic predisposition.
The sources break down Eli's proposed formula into what they call an additive theory. So NDE, or imminent death, plus a strong will,
Equals a fundamental, lasting chemical and physiological shift, leading to a stable, superhuman ability. Eli argued it's the mind and body responding simultaneously to the ultimate life-threatening event by evolving past mortality.
He posited that the massive influx of catecholamines, the fight-or-flight hormones like adrenaline release during that NDE crisis zone, it forces a permanent structural or chemical change in the body's recovery system.
And let's dedicate a moment to Victor's initial academic critique here, because it really reinforces his intellectual rigor before he, descends into recklessness.
Good point. He challenges the vagueness of the formula, specifically the subjectivity of terms like genetic predisposition and strong will.
Right. As a scientist focused on anatomy and quantifiable thresholds, Victor found those variables untestable and therefore unscientific. He saw them as philosophical loopholes, not empirical data points.
So his skepticism wasn't about the possibility of EOs, it was about the reliability of Eli's proposed method. He was basically arguing that Eli's formula contained too many non-measurable variables to be replicated successfully in a lab setting.
But that intellectual posturing, it just dissolves so quickly into this visceral, envious desire.
Oh, yeah. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Victor, despite his academic skepticism, he's the one who pushes for the immediate practical application. He looks at Eli, the man who designed the theoretical framework, and asks, almost daringly, why not actually try to create one?
That's the moment, the final, fatal turn.
Yeah.
Victor correctly identifies that Eli's thesis was never meant to remain purely theoretical.
He saw right through Eli's polished ambition. Eli initially claimed his thesis was not meant to be practical, but Victor challenged his composure, he tells him. Nothing you ever do, Eli, is meant to be theoretical. I see it in you.
And Victor recognized that the only way to beat Eli was to push past that intellectual boundary, to force the theory into reality, and he volunteered to go first. That's what starts the lethal competition.
So when it came time to test the theory, Victor volunteered to be the test subject, and it's driven by that primal academic need to be a participant, not a spectator.
It was a race for legitimacy, for sure. Victor wanted the proof or the failure to be entirely contained within his own body. He refused to be relegated to Eli's sidekick.
But his chosen method, as the sources detail, it was fundamentally flawed based on the very physiological principles Eli had just laid out.
Totally flawed. He opted for a self-administered overdose using a combination of amphetamines and painkillers washed down with whiskey.
And his rationale was purely pragmatic. It was easiest to explain if it fails, and Eli could theoretically delay calling the hospital until Victor hit the most critical threshold, the moment of death.
But the documents, they reveal Victor's stark realization during that toxic descent, a moment of lucid horror where he realized the science was just wrong, wrong, wrong.
The combination of alcohol and strong painkillers fundamentally dulled his senses and his central nervous system. So this risked a passive fade into death.
Instead of the violent fighting response required to shock the body into permanent evolutionary change.
Exactly. The key ingredient for Eli's NDE theory, that massive influx of panic and fear needed to trigger the maximal output of adrenaline and catecholamines, it was missing because Victor was too chemically suppressed.
So the resulting attempt was a failure. Victor stopped breathing, he almost flatlined, but Eli saved him too early. Maybe because of Eli's own fear of losing his intellectual partner. Who knows?
Right. Victor felt physically terrible, endured forced therapy, but avoided permanent damage. But critically, he walked away with the precise understanding that being too numb to panic was the central flaw.
And here's where the story gets so much darker. Because while that first NDE failed, Victor's true EO power manifests after his second, more violent attempt, the one that kills Angie Knight.
His power is pain manipulation, the ability to switch sensation on and off. But the sources, they really emphasize the nuance here. He realizes quickly that it isn't a simple binary switch, on and off.
It's a complex, subtle spectrum, which he describes as a dial with hundreds of notches.
This control allows him to fine-tune his physical and mental state, achieving a place he calls between numb and normal.
And the psychological consequence of this nuanced power is profound. The calm that accompanies the physical absence of pain leads directly to a mental absence of panic and a profound disregard for consequence.
He can physically turn off the body's warning system, which means his thoughts are now drawn toward the immediate, the violent, the rash. He's bypassing the moral constraints that fear, pain, and self-preservation once imposed.
The sources suggest that by conquering physical pain, Victor simultaneously extinguished his mental capacity for moral panic. That detachment is the core psychological takeaway. He literally became comfortable with acting without considering the long-term painful consequences because that mental barrier was just gone.
And we see how he honed this new ability during his incarceration.
Victor's 9 years in Wrighton Penitentiary were not wasted time. They were a training ground.
He had 463 inmates, guards, and visitors to practice on, meticulously mapping the limits of his control. He became, as the documents describe him, a dealer in a drug only he could provide.
He learned to inflict instant agony sparingly, using it as a tool of dominance and leverage, making sure that the agony was just intense enough to be memorable without completely breaking the subject.
And conversely, he perfected the art of the gift of painlessness. The files detail his relationship with his cellmate Mitch, where Victor would occasionally reduce Mitch's chronic pain or anxiety.
An act that fostered a fierce loyalty.
Absolutely. And this was complex control, not just suppressing pain, but targeting specific neural pathways. For example, he could neutralize the throbbing pain from a broken finger without eliminating the underlying sensory input needed for, fine motor control.
Let's zoom in on Mitch for a moment, because Mitchell Turner is absolutely critical to Victor's current operation.
Oh, for sure. He's described as massive, clever, and heavily tattooed. And he earned Victor's fondness because he was utterly unconcerned with prison politics or Victor's brooding presence.
While Mitch's own EO power is only implied, the documents mention Victor trying to use his power on Mitch during a particularly bad nightmare, but Mitch was only tired, unamused, but safe the next morning.
Which suggests some kind of resistance.
Exactly. But his primary utility is purely technical.
He's a highly skilled hacker, incarcerated for hacking and providing the necessary technical counterpoint to Eli's physical invulnerability. They rely on Mitch for everything.
From the rudimentary shorting out security cameras with precisely soldered gum wrappers during the escape, to the highly advanced, he's the intelligence arm, the one who can access classified records, police reports, and medical histories to uncover Eli's true decade-long activities.
The bond between them is pragmatic. It's utility and shared anti-establishment views.
Okay, so pivoting now to Eli's calculated approach. His attempt, conducted shortly after Victor's near-fatal failure, was immediately informed by that failure. Eli's adjusted hypothesis was critical. The booze and pills were counterproductive because the massive pain, fear, and panic were absolutely crucial for the maximal catecholamine and adrenaline production needed to shock the body into an EO state.
And his method reflects this understanding. It was calculated, deliberate, and terrifyingly controlled, designed to induce death while maximizing the physical trauma and the fight-or-flight response.
He employed an ice bath and epinephrine injection. He locks himself in the icy bath to induce severe hypothermia, which dramatically lowers the body's core temperature, leading to a slowdown of metabolic processes and eventually cardiac arrest.
And Victor was there solely as a safety measure. Eli used 3 EpiPens. The sources confirm this was the maximum medically advisable dose of adrenaline, designed to shock the heart back into rhythm upon revival.
He instructed Victor to administer CPR and chest compressions, a process Victor performed so aggressively it resulted in Eli's cracked ribs. The risk was monumental, but the control was absolute.
And we get a look at Eli's underlying philosophical framework right before he goes under, which is key to his entire decade-long crusade. He prays beforehand.
He puts his life into his hands, demonstrating this strong religious conviction that's interwoven with his scientific ambition.
Wait, how does a scientific experiment that requires self-induced cardiac arrest suddenly become a mandate from God? Does the source material offer any insight into that massive leap of moral justification?
It does, but it's entirely self-serving. Eli believes he isn't playing God, he's cooperating with him. He views the human body as a divine machine, and the NDE is merely the extreme pressure required to activate a latent potential put there by a higher power.
So by surviving, he proves himself worthy of that power.
That's his logic, and that religious filter immediately defines his future actions. The result of the ice bath is immediate and successful. Eli gasps back to life, feeling extraordinarily lucky.
And the power manifests shortly after, when Eli falls on broken glass, cutting his palm. Victor witnesses the wound knitting itself back together in moments. He describes the tissue as moving like a time-lapse video of cellular growth.
Whoa.
Yeah. And Eli immediately realizes the power is reflexive regeneration. It is unconscious and automatic. He describes it as, I can't stop the tissue from repairing. He heals quickly from the cracked ribs, and later, knife wounds close almost instantly. It's total, rapid physical repair overriding natural biological processes.
And this power immediately defines his moral trajectory.
Oh, completely.
Eli interprets his ability, regeneration, and healing as a reflection of his pure psyche and divine blessing. He believes his ability is pure, divine, and crucially cannot technically use his power to hurt others.
Which provides the precise moral license he needs to judge and execute other EOs. He sees his power as a confirmation that he is the morally correct EO, and anyone else is a deviation, a corruption.
This success, however, immediately poisons their already fragile friendship. Victor, who felt relegated to sidekick and was furious that Eli had succeeded where he had failed, leaves Eli to plan his next solo NDE attempt.
He cannot be a spectator in the grand experiment he helped initiate.
Victor's driven by profound jealousy and a need for equal attention. His second attempt is no longer driven by pragmatism, but by calculated, overwhelming trauma, a desperate attempt to compensate for the numbness of the first attempt.
He lures Angie Knight to the engineering lab using their old Save Me code.
A code developed freshman year as a signal of true crisis.
Right, and he does it under the false pretense of needing rescue from a dangerous adrenal compound pill he'd supposedly taken. He intends to use the lab's high-voltage electrical equipment to induce cardiac arrest.
The sources slow down dramatically here to emphasize the chaos of Angie's death. The experiment goes catastrophically wrong, not because of the electricity, but because Victor's power manifests chaotically during the electrocution.
Initially, the pain sensation is switched off like a blown fuse within Victor, but then the pain is suddenly outside him, manifesting in the air as electrical buzzing, crackling like static.
The documents describe it as the sheer volume of pain being externalized.
And the uncontrolled power overwhelms and kills Angela Knight instantly. Victor observes that Angie is dead with no charge, no energy, the pain is gone, replaced by the profound calm that his power now grants him.
Confirming that linkage between physical numbness and emotional detachment.
But before Victor can fully process the murder or the strange emergence of his power, Eli executes the first, most pivotal betrayal.
That moment is calculated and chilling. Victor had called Eli to the lab, trusting him. But while Victor is distracted, he hears the faint double click of the apartment landline, followed by the three distinct tonal taps. 911.
Eli is calling the police, shouting EO to the dispatcher, Detective Stell, while simultaneously maintaining a facade of being drunk and distraught on his cell phone for Victor's benefit.
He uses the chaotic, horrifying moment of Angie's death to eliminate Victor entirely, framing him as a murderous, corrupt EO.
Thereby cementing his own image as the righteous scientist and, eventually, the hero.
The fallout is immediate. Victor is arrested, but the confrontation in the lab, coupled with the manifestation of his power, has fundamentally altered his physical and mental state.
Right, he escapes custody by turning his power onto himself, fine-tuning that nuanced dial between numb and normal. He just walks out, bypassing the panic and chaos that would have overwhelmed a normal man.
And his first mission, driven by rage and deep intellectual injury, is revenge and confrontation with Eli.
He confronts Eli back at the apartment, and the sources give us the dialogue that defines the next decade. Eli immediately accuses Victor of being something that's crawled into his skin, a devil wearing him.
So Eli clearly believes the real good Victor Vale died during the electric shock. This just reinforces his emerging moral conviction that EOs who aren't him, especially those with dangerous chaotic powers, are inherently corrupt, demonic entities he's divinely tasked to neutralize.
And Victor's retaliation is perfectly calculated to test the limits of Eli's divine regeneration and shatter his self-perception. Victor stabs Eli in the stomach with a knife.
This action reveals the first critical weakness in Eli's power. Victor discovers Eli cannot heal until the knife is physically removed. This suggests a boundary in his reflexive regeneration. The power cannot expel foreign objects or mend tissue around an active intrusion. The pain is suppressed, but the physical interruption remains.
Eli's response is swift, brutal, and definitive. He shoots Victor multiple times, one under the ribs, one above the heart, and one through the back. As he does this, Eli maintains his terrifying moral certainty.
He claims he is entirely unafraid. My fear was what death took from him. He views himself as immune to conventional threat and therefore, by his own logic, morally untouchable and superior to Victor.
The psychological impact on Victor is immense. His immediate takeaway from the confrontation solidified the rivalry. Eli's self-righteousness, combined with his immunity to conventional harm, makes him a terrifying and dangerous adversary.
Victor realizes they are now bonded by blood and death and science. But Victor now harbors this profound need, not just to kill Eli, but to see Eli suffer, to make a profound impression, and to ruin Eli's impenetrable sense of peace. This need for attention becomes his driving force.
And this conflict shapes Victor's entire decade of imprisonment, turning it into training. 2 days ago, Victor and Midge execute their highly planned break out of Brighton Penitentiary.
And Victor immediately begins his search for Eli, realizing that if Eli isn't aging, he must be hiding in plain sight, continuing his crusade.
He finds Eli's face in the National Mark, a nationwide paper, under the headline, "Civilian Hero Saves Bank in the City of Merritt."
The documents include Victor's extensive analysis of that bank incident. It details the article's claims that the civilian hero, Eli Cardale, now rebranded as Eli Ever, foiled a bank robbery by a man named Barry Lynch.
But Victor's subsequent deep dive into the police and medical records, facilitated by Mitch, reveals Eli's true decade-long agenda.
They confirmed that Barry Lynch, the supposed robber, had clear EO markers. He had suffered a verifiable NDE, and police reports detailed a string of arrests for theft, using an unidentified weapon that suggested superhuman strength or ability.
So Lynch wasn't just a random criminal.
Not at all. Victor's analysis is sharp. Eli staged the entire heroic rescue, utilizing a known EO as bait, only to shoot him and claim self-defense, masked by religious fervor and media attention. This confirmed that Eli has been systematically hunting and executing other EOs he deems wrong or unnatural.
A private, brutal campaign of execution that is completely invisible to the outside world.
Furthermore, the photograph itself is telling. 10 years of regenerative power have left Eli completely untouched by age. He looks exactly as he did in college.
And this visible difference between the perpetually youthful, righteous Eli and the now older, scarred, and nihilistic Victor just deepens that psychological rift.
Victor's goal is solidified. He has to stop Eli, but his method is personal. He wants to watch Eli bleed, to make an indelible impression, and to ruin Eli's peace.
He concludes that if stopping Eli requires him to embrace the role of a villain, he can live with that. The chase is on, and Merritt, the city Eli chose as his hunting ground, is Victor's target. As Victor and Mitch arrive in Merritt, the dynamic dramatically changes with the introduction of Sidney Clark.
This is a huge turning point.
Huge. They stumble upon this small, injured girl walking alone on a rain-soaked road. And Victor is immediately drawn to her by an intense, overwhelming humming sensation that signals pain that is distinctly not his.
He recognizes the presence of another EO, and he uses his power to temporarily take away her pain from a fresh bullet wound, offering this immediate, overwhelming relief.
The sources detail Sydney's traumatic origin story, which perfectly fits Eli's NDE hypothesis, but with a horrifying twist. Just before her 12th birthday, she and her older sister, Serena, died after falling through the ice in Brighton Commons. Both were pronounced dead at the scene before reviving spontaneously.
And her subsequent physical condition reflects this unnatural event. Her pulse is abnormally slow, her body temperature is perpetually low, and she has barely grown an inch since the day she died. It suggests her body is trapped in a biological stasis.
And her EO power is truly unique in this conflict. It represents the ultimate disruption to Eli's belief system.
She has the power of resurrection, raising the dead.
Yeah, she discovered it in the hospital when a body she touched twitched and later revived. It was confirmed later in a highly disturbing event in the morgue when she brought an already autopsied body back to life.
The physiological process described when she uses her power is significant. When Sydney touches a body, an ice water chill floods her veins. This is the marker, the physical cost of reversing the death process.
And the documents state that the resurrected are alive, human, and mortal again, but they are just not the form that killed them. This means the body revives with its physical wounds healed, but the original fatal condition is negated. It effectively gives them a second chance at life, though perhaps not in perfect condition.
This miracle, however, is what drew Eli's attention, thanks to her older sister, Serena.
Serena's EO power is implied to be related to control or persuasion. The file suggests she was able to manipulate Sydney into staying in the hospital to demonstrate her power. Serena lures Sydney to Merritt to demonstrate her trick to Eli,
Who then, in a terrifying display of his self-righteousness, tries to execute Sydney.
This aligns perfectly with Eli's fanaticism. He called Sydney's power unnatural and against God, claiming his attempt to kill her was for the greater good.
Confirming his belief that only his regeneration is pure and sanctioned. Resurrection, in Eli's view, violates the natural order and undermines the authority he believes his own power represents.
Sydney flees after being shot in the arm, right into Victor's path.
Victor finds her, sees her physical injury, and uses his power to gain her trust. But his assessment is entirely pragmatic. Sydney is a scared, small, 12 going on 13 girl with a bullet wound. But she is a profoundly useful stray who holds vital information about Eli's location and methods.
He sees her as a tool.
And Victor, ever the ruthless pragmatist, immediately performs the dog test to confirm the reliability and stability of her ability. He finds a mangled, dying dog in an alley, and to prove her power without doubt.
He ruthlessly shoots the dog, then forces Sydney to use her ability. It's a moment designed to test Sydney's moral boundaries and confirm the utility of her gift.
The dog, later named Doll after a measurement of pain, is resurrected, its crushed ribs reforming. Victor sees the dog's revival and realizes Sydney is the perfect method and message to lure Eli out. She is the ultimate threat to Eli's belief system.
Because her power completely undoes death itself, it makes Eli's decade of systematic executions entirely meaningless.
If Victor can weaponize resurrection, Eli loses his entire moral foundation.
With Sydney now aligned with Victor, a partnership built on temporary utility and shared enmity toward Eli, the tactical planning begins.
Mitch, the master hacker, immediately goes to work creating a sophisticated search matrix. Victor needs intelligence, not just about Eli, but about his targets.
And Mitch details the specific parameters he used, which adds this layer of technical rigor to their efforts. He searches police reports, medical records, and psych notes for highly specific NDE markers. He's looking for things like documented flatlining events, severe localized brain trauma followed by improbable recovery.
And most importantly, documented massive adrenaline and catecholamine spikes in victims of trauma who later showed signs of unusual physical activity.
The intelligence results are grim, and they confirm Victor's worst suspicions beyond speculation. Mitch finds 8 EO candidates in the Merritt area from the last year, but all 8 profiles are marked dead, X'd out with a thick black Sharpie on Mitch's printouts.
Eli's systematic execution of EOs is confirmed. Victor realizes he has truly unleashed a monster on the world 10 years ago, and that monster is far more active than he had initially thought.
Mitch also finds 4 remaining living EO candidates, but Victor dismisses them as irrelevant now and only meant as bait. The survival is secondary.
Sydney, the girl who can reverse death, is the true weapon. Victor's focus shifts entirely from passively tracking Eli's next target to setting the definitive, unavoidable trap.
The key part of the plan is the message at Merritt Cemetery. It's a bold, public disruption of Eli's carefully constructed narrative. Victor and Sydney travel there to exhume the body of Barry Lynch, the man Eli staged the killing of at the bank.
Victor intends to use the resurrected corpse as undeniable proof that Victor is back, powerful, and ready to completely disrupt Eli's crusade.
Sydney resurrects Barry Lynch, but the results are mixed and deeply complex. Barry is described as flickering and shorting out because he is an EO himself.
This suggests that EOs who have already gone through the traumatic NDE process react differently to Sydney's power. Sydney's resurrection worked, but Barry did not come back the way he should.
And this is a crucial physiological and tactical insight for Victor. Barry is less dead, meaning he is animated and conscious, but he's also partially invulnerable to Victor's pain power. He's laughing maniacally and cackling, "I don't feel a thing."
Which suggests the NDE process grants a permanent, chaotic level of pain tolerance that Victor cannot completely override. It's a flaw in his current ability set.
Barry's confession solidifies Victor's narrative about Eli's character. Barry reveals he was not a random robber. He was recruited by Eli for a tryout, for a hero league or some shit.
A recruitment scheme Eli uses to identify and lure EOs.
Right. And Barry was then shot by Eli during the demonstration, a deliberate execution masked as a rescue.
Victor's ultimatum is the final theatrical piece of the trap, designed to maximize psychological impact on Eli. Victor uses Barry's unique predicament, trapped in the coffin, partially resurrected, flickering between life and death as leverage.
He nails Barry's pants to the coffin, pins him with his boot, and threatens to bury him alive unless Barry delivers a specific, taunting message to Eli. "I'm back, and I brought your victims with me."
Victor's using a partially undead EO as a lure. It's a demonstration of a complete embrace of ruthless tactics and moral ambiguity.
Victor's current philosophy is fully cemented here. He is comfortable with the villain role, concluding, "Half the fun is trying to kill Eli." The documents conclude with Victor waiting in the hotel, surrounded by the evidence of Eli's crimes, fully prepared for the confrontation.
The source materials conclude with Victor in the hotel, surrounded by the profiles of the dead EOs and the 4 surviving candidates, realizing the profound destruction he has caused. The conflict has moved entirely beyond the halls of Laughlin University and past theoretical science. It has solidified into a genuine philosophical and physical war.
We have 2 extraordinary individuals driven by entirely different, opposing goals. On one side, Eli Ever, the perpetually youthful regenerative hero who operates under a terrifyingly self-righteous, seemingly divine moral code. He lost his fear and believes this immunity grants him the divine mandate to execute those he deems unnatural threats.
And on the other side, you have Victor Vale, the pain manipulator, who finds calm and intellectual freedom in his numbness. And he uses crime, pain infliction, and now a child with a resurrection power to seek revenge and, more deeply, the focused, suffering attention of his former friend.
Victor embraced the darkness and disregard for consequence that came with his power, a form of profound freedom from human restriction.
What stands out most is the complex moral calculus that developed from that NDE theory, where success warped the survivor. Eli views his invulnerability as a sign of purity and purpose, giving him the right to judge others. Victor, conversely, embraced the amoral nihilism inherent in conquering pain.
So Victor's plan now involves using a partially functional resurrected EO, a creature that should not exist, to draw Eli out. Considering Eli's ability to heal instantly and his utter professed fearlessness, Victor needs a monumental disruption.
And if Eli truly conquered his fear, as he claims, and Victor's ability thrives on nerve sensation and the emotional response to it, can Victor's power truly impact someone who is entirely fearless?
It raises the critical question of Eli's weakness. If Eli is immune to the sensation of pain and immune to the emotion of fear, Victor's primary weapon is, neutralized. The source material suggests Victor must target something less tangible.
This is where the synthesis comes in. Eli's immunity to physical harm and fear has perhaps left him profoundly vulnerable to the total destruction of his moral structure, to the shattering of his self-perception, as a righteous hero.
So if Sydney's power can permanently negate Eli's divine mission by resurrecting his victims, the source material implies that Sydney herself is the only weapon Victor truly needs to destroy Eli's carefully crafted identity. And here is the final provocative thought for you to consider, based on the strange, chaotic state of Barry Lynch. Barry was flickering and shorting out. If Sydney's power can only partially revive an EO, leaving them in this chaotic, semi-mortal, invincible state, does that mean Victor's trap isn't designed to kill Eli, but instead to use Sydney to transform Eli's regeneration into something monstrous, uncontrolled, and unbearable? Is Victor aiming to destroy Eli's perfect, eternal life rather than merely his body?